Chapter 1. The Invitation to Ashbourne Hall. The autumn of 1928 was crisp, with the leaves of London's plane trees turning amber under a sky that promised rain. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal morning coat and polished spats, sat in his modest yet elegant flat, sipping a tisane. His small, fastidious hands held a cream-coloured envelope, embossed with the crest of Lord Haverford. The invitation within was penned in precise, looping script, requesting Poirot's presence at Ashbourne Hall, a grand estate in the Hertfordshire countryside, for a weekend gathering. Monsieur Hastings would call this a lark, Poirot murmured to himself, his green eyes gleaming with curiosity. At Poirot he senses quelque chose, a puzzle perhaps in this assembly of strangers. Captain Hastings was abroad, leaving Poirot to face this adventure alone. The invitation mentioned a celebration of Lord Haverford's recent acquisition of a rare Pissarro painting. That Poirot suspected more than art appreciation lay behind the summons. His reputation as a detective often drew such invitations, cloaked in social niceties but hinting at hidden motives. The journey to Ashbourne Hall was pleasant, the train cutting through rolling hills dappled with sheep. Upon arrival, a chauffeured Rolls-Royce carried Poirot to the estate, a sprawling Georgian manor with ivy-clad walls and mullioned windows that glinted in the late afternoon sun. The butler, a dour man named Perkins with a face like a well-polished gravestone, greeted him at the door. "Welcome, Monsieur Poirot," Perkins intoned, bowing stiffly. "His lordship awaits you in the drawing-room." The drawing-room was a vision of opulence, mahogany panelling, a roaring fire, and a chandelier that cast prismatic light across velvet drapes. Lord Haverford, a robust man in his 50s with a walrus moustache and a penchant for tweed, stood at the centre, greeting his guests with jovial handshakes. His wife, Lady Margaret, a pale woman with sharp cheekbones and a nervous smile, hovered nearby, her pearl necklace catching the firelight. Poirot's little grey cells hummed as he surveyed the assembled company. There was Miss Clara Winthrop, a vivacious actress, whose laugh was as bright as her crimson lipstick, though her eyes darted with calculation. Beside her stood Dr. Ernest Caldwell, a physician with a thin frame and a habit of adjusting his spectacles, his demeanour suggesting secrets held close. Julian Trent, a stockbroker with slicked hair and a booming voice, discussed the market with an air of self-importance. Mrs. Evelyn Trent, his wife, was a quiet woman whose hands twisted her lace handkerchief incessantly. Finally, Lady Beatrice Langley, an elderly dowager with a silver cane and a tongue sharper than a paring knife, sat in a high-backed chair, her gaze dissecting each guest. "Dinner at 8, Perkins," Lord Haverford bellowed, clapping his hand. "Monsieur Poirot, you'll find Ashbourne's table unmatched. Our chef, Monsieur Dubois, trained in Paris." Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching. "Excellent. Poirot, he appreciates the art of the table. It reveals much of the character, n'est-ce pas?" Lady Beatrice snorted. "Character? Most lack it, Monsieur Poirot. But I dare say you'll find our little gathering illuminating." As the guests dispersed to dress for dinner, Poirot lingered, noting the undercurrents of tension. Clara's forced gaiety, Dr. Caldwell's furtive glance at Lady Margaret, and Mrs. Trent's anxious fidgeting. The dining room, he sensed, would be the stage for more than fine cuisine. Already his mind catalogued the small details, the way Lord Haverford gripped his glass too tightly, the way Lady Beatrice's cane tapped a rhythm of impatience. Something was amiss at Ashbourne Hall, and Hercule Poirot would uncover it, one course at a time. Chapter 2. The First Dinner. The dining room at Ashbourne Hall was a spectacle of grandeur, its long mahogany table gleaming under the soft glow of 3 crystal chandeliers. Silver candelabra, adorned with flickering tapers, cast delicate shadows on the damask tablecloth, while the air carried the faint scent of beeswax and rosemary. Hercule Poirot, resplendent in a black dinner jacket, his moustache waxed to perfection, took his seat with a nod to Perkins, the butler, who directed the footmen with the precision of a conductor. Lord Reginald Haverford presided at the head of the table, his laughter booming as he raised a glass of claret. To good company and fine art, he toasted, gesturing toward the Pissarro painting, newly hung above the fireplace, a vibrant landscape that seemed oddly out of place amid the room's somber portraits. To art, echoed Miss Clara Winthrop, her emerald gown shimmering as she leaned forward, her smile a touch too radiant. Poirot noted her quick glance at Julian Trent, the stockbroker, who sat opposite, his fork already poised over the hors d'oeuvre of smoked salmon. Mrs. Evelyn Trent, beside her husband, picked at her plate, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth, as if it held some hidden script. "Art is all very well," Lady Beatrice Langley remarked from her seat near Poirot, her voice dry as autumn leaves. She tapped her silver cane against the floor, her untouched salmon pushed aside. "But I'd wager half this room's more interested in Reginald's fortune than his painting." A ripple of unease passed through the guests. Lady Margaret Haverford at the table's foot coughed delicately, her fingers tightening around her wineglass. Ernest Caldwell, seated beside her, adjusted his spectacles and murmured something about the weather, his knife scraping the plate with a faint screech. Poirot's green eyes darted from face to face, cataloguing the small peculiarities of their dining habit. Clara Winthrop ate with theatrical daintiness, her fork barely touching her lips, as if performing for an unseen audience. Julian Trent devoured his food with gusto, his napkin already stained with sauce, while his wife's plate remained nearly full, her fork moving in aimless circles. Caldwell cut his salmon into precise squares, eating methodically, while Lady Beatrice sipped only water, her disdain for the meal evident. Lord Haverford meanwhile ate heartily, but paused often to refill his glass, his joviality tinged with nervous energy. The soup course arrived, a velouté of mushrooms served in delicate porcelain bowls. Perkins ladled it from a silver tureen with practiced grace, the steam curling upward in the candlelight. Poirot inhaled the aroma, approving, but his attention was drawn to Lady Beatrice, who waved the bowl away with a curt gesture. "No soup for me, Perkins," she said sharply. "It's always too rich for my taste." "Pity, Clara," said her tone teasing. "Monsieur Dubois' soups are divine. Don't you agree, Monsieur Poirot?" "Mais oui," Poirot replied, his spoon poised. "The soup, it is a mirror of the chef's soul, and of the household's order. One observes much in how it is served, and how it is received." Julian Trent laughed, a loud, grating sound. "You're an odd one, Poirot. It's just soup, not a detective's manual." Poirot smiled, his mustache twitching. "Mon ami, the little details, they speak loudly to Hercule Poirot." As the conversation turned to the stock market, Poirot noted a fleeting exchange of glances between Dr. Caldwell and Lady Margaret, her hand brushing his sleeve under the table. Mrs. Trent's eyes followed the gesture, her lips tightened. Clara, meanwhile, flirted shamelessly with Lord Haverford, who reddened but seemed pleased. Lady Beatrice, silent now, watched them all, her cane still tapping a slow rhythm. The soup bowls were cleared, and the main course roast pheasant with truffle sauce was served. But Poirot's mind lingered on the soup, on Lady Beatrice's refusal, and on the faint tremor in Perkins's hand as he handled the tureen. Something in the dining room was amiss, a discord in the symphony of silver and crystal. The little grey cells, they were already at work, piecing together the puzzle that would soon become a matter of life and death. Chapter 3: The Cold Soup. The dining room at Ashbourne Hall, bathed in the golden glow of chandeliers, seemed to hold its breath, as the second dinner of the weekend commenced. The table was set with meticulous care, the silver gleaming, the napkins folded into crisp. Hercule Poirot, seated between Miss Clara Winthrop and Dr. Ernest Caldwell, observed the scene with his usual precision, his green eyes noting every detail of the guest's demeanor. The air was heavy with the scent of roasted lamb, but an undercurrent of unease lingered from the previous evening's tensions. Lord Reginald Haverford at the head of the table was in high spirits, regaling the company with tales of his recent travels to Paris. Lady Margaret at the opposite end,
offered a strange smile, her fingers toying with the stem of her wine-glass. Clara Winthrop laughed too loudly at Lord Haverford's anecdotes, while Julian Trent, the stockbroker, ate with the same voraciousness as before, oblivious to his wife Evelyn's quiet withdrawal. Caldwell, ever methodical, sliced his bread into precise pieces, his spectacles glinting as he stole glances at Lady Margaret. Lady Beatrice Langley, seated across from Poirot, was unusually silent, her silver cane resting against her chair, her sharp eyes fixed on some distant point.
The soup course was served, a consommé of beef, clear and fragrant, ladled from a silver tureen by Perkins, the butler, whose movements were as precise as clockwork. Poirot noted the faint clink of the ladle against the tureen, the steam rising in delicate curls. Each guest received a bowl, except Lady Beatrice, who had once again refused the soup the previous evening. Tonight, however, she acquiesced with a grudging nod. "Very well, Perkins," she said, her voice like dry parchment, "but make it quick. I've no patience for dawdling." Perkins placed the bowl before her, and the dinner continued, the conversation turning to the Pissarro painting above the fireplace. Poirot, sipping his consommé, found it exquisite, though his attention was drawn to Lady Beatrice's untouched bowl. She sat rigid, her hands folded in her lap, her lips pressed into a thin line. The minutes ticked by, and the soup before her grew cold, its surface forming a faint skin. "Monsieur Poirot," Clara said, her tone playful, "you're awfully quiet. Is the soup not to your liking?" "Au contraire, mademoiselle," Poirot replied, his moustache twitching. "The soup, it is perfection. But I observe that not all share Poirot's appreciation." His eyes flickered toward Lady Beatrice, who had yet to touch her spoon. Suddenly a sharp gasp broke the murmur of conversation. Lady Margaret half rose from her chair, her hand flying to her mouth. "Beatrice," she cried. All eyes turned to Lady Beatrice. Her head had slumped forward, her chin resting on her chest, her cane slipping to the floor with a soft thud. Caldwell was at her side in an instant, his fingers pressing against her wrist. The room fell silent, save for the faint crackle of the fire. She's dead," Dr. Caldwell said, his voice trembling as he adjusted his spectacles. No part. A collective murmur of shock rippled through the guests. Julian Trent dropped his spoon, which clattered against his bowl. Clara's hand flew to her throat, her eyes wide. Evelyn Trent clutched her husband's arm, her face pale. Lord Haverford stood, his chair scraping against the floor, his joviality replaced by a look of horror. "Dead?" he bellowed. "How? She was just speaking." Poirot rose, his movements calm and deliberate. He approached Lady Beatrice, his eyes scanning her still form, then the table before her. The soup bowl caught his attention untouched, its contents cold, the spoon resting neatly beside it. He leaned closer, his nose twitching as he inhaled. A faint, unfamiliar note lingered beneath the aroma of the consommé, a scent that did not belong. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his little grey cell sparking. "The soup, it is cold, and perhaps it tells a story." Perkins, standing frozen by the tureen, met Poirot's gaze, his face a mask of professional composure, though his hands trembled slightly. The other guests erupted into questions, their voices overlapping, but Poirot raised a hand for silence. "Mes amis, remain calm," he said, his voice steady. "We must send for the authorities." "But Poirot," he will observe. "The dining room, it is a stage, and the soup, peut-être." As Lord Haverford dispatched a footman to fetch the police, Poirot's gaze lingered on the cold soup, the untouched spoon, and the faces of the guests, each a portrait of guilt, fear or confusion. The murder had begun, and the dining habits of Ashbourne Hall would lead Hercule Poirot to the truth. Chapter 4. The Inspector Arrives. The dining room at Ashbourne Hall, once a stage for elegance, now felt like a tableau frozen in time. Lady Beatrice Langley's body had been gently covered with a tablecloth, her cold soup bowl still before her, a silent witness to the crime. The guests, ushered into the drawing-room, whispered in hushed tones, their faces pale under the firelight. Hercule Poirot remained in the dining room, his small fastidious figure moving with purpose as he examined the table, the tureen, and the untouched spoon beside Lady Beatrice's plate.
The clock on the mantel struck 10 when the sound of gravel crunching under tires announced the arrival of the police. Inspector Japp, a stout man with a bristling moustache and a no-nonsense air, strode into the manor, his overcoat damp from the evening mist. Behind him trailed a young constable, notebook in hand, looking slightly overwhelmed by the grandeur of Ashbourne Hall. "Poirot," Japp exclaimed, spotting the detective near the fireplace. "Should have known you'd be in the thick of it. What's this about a dead dowager and a bowl of soup?" "Mon cher Japp," Poirot said, his green eyes glinting. "It is a tragedy most peculiar. Lady Beatrice Langley, she is poisoned, I suspect, during the dinner. The soup, it is cold, and she did not touch it. This, it is significant." Japp raised an eyebrow, rubbing his chin. "Poison? Eh? Sounds like your sort of puzzle, Poirot. Right, let's have a look." He approached the covered body, lifting the cloth briefly before turning to the constable. "Get the coroner out here, lad, and secure the dining room. No one touches anything." Poirot inclined his head, approving of Japp's efficiency, though his mind was already racing ahead. "The dining room, Inspector, it is the heart of this mystery. The soup, the service, the habits of the guests, they speak to Poirot." Japp snorted. "You and your habits, Poirot. I'll stick to alibis and evidence. Who's in the house?" Lord Reginald Haverford, summoned by Perkins, entered, his face ashen. "Inspector, this is dreadful." Beatrice was difficult. "But murdered? At my table?" "Seems so, my lord," Japp said, pulling out his notebook. "I'll need to speak to everyone." "Where are the others?" "In the drawing room," Haverford replied, wringing his hands. "My wife Margaret is terribly shaken. The guests, well, they're a mixed lot." Poirot followed Japp to the drawing room, where the guests sat in uneasy silence. Lady Margaret clutched a handkerchief, her eyes red-rimmed. Clara Winthrop, her vivacity dimmed, sipped brandy, her hands trembling. Julian Trent paced by the window, his wife Evelyn watching him with anxious eyes. Dr. Ernest Caldwell stood by the fire, his spectacles fogged, his expression unreadable. "Right," Japp said, clapping his hands. "I'm Inspector Japp, of Scotland Yard. Lady Beatrice was murdered, likely poisoned. No one leaves the estate until we sort this out. I'll take statements one by one. Lord Haverford, you first." As Haverford led Japp to the study, Poirot lingered, his gaze sweeping the room. Clara's brandy glass was nearly empty, yet she had barely eaten at dinner. A contrast worth noting. Evelyn Trent's fingers twisted her handkerchief into knots, her untouched tea cooling on the table beside her. Dr. Caldwell's methodical habit of cleaning his spectacles persisted, a nervous tic perhaps. Lady Margaret's grief seemed genuine, but her glance at Caldwell was fleeting, guarded. Returning to the dining room, Poirot knelt by Lady Beatrice's chair, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of her soup bowl. The consommé, now congealed, held that faint alien scent he had noted earlier. A trace of something bitter, not of the kitchen. He examined the tureen, still half full, and the ladle, its silver surface unblemished. Perkins, hovering nearby, cleared his throat. "May I assist, Monsieur Poirot?" the butler asked, his voice steady but his eyes wary. "Petit," Poirot said, straightening. "You served the soup, Monsieur Perkins. All received a bowl, oui?" "Yes, sir," Perkins replied. "Even Lady Beatrice, though she refused it last night. Tonight, she accepted, but well, you saw." Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching. "And you noticed nothing unusual?" There was no hesitation, no strange behavior at the table. Perkins hesitated, then shook his head. "Nothing, sir, the service was as always," but Poirot's little grey cells disagreed. The cold soup, the untouched spoon, the scent, they were threads in a tapestry of deceit. As Japp's voice echoed from the study, questioning Haverford, Poirot knew the dining room held the key to the murder. The habits of the guests, their actions at the table, would lead him to the truth, one meticulous step at a time. Chapter 5, The Suspect's Alibus. The drawing room at Ashbourne Hall, its air thick with the scent of cigar smoke and nervous anticipation, served as a makeshift interrogation chamber. Inspector Japp, his notebook open and pencil poised, sat at a mahogany writing desk, his broad frame casting a shadow across the Persian rug. Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small immaculate figure a contrast to Jap's bustling energy, his green eyes scanning the guests as they awaited their turn to be questioned. The murder of Lady Beatrice Langley hung over the room like a storm cloud, and the cold soup, still vivid in Poirot's mind, whispered of secrets yet to be uncovered. Jap had already interviewed Lord Reginald Haverford, who claimed to have been at the head of the table, engrossed in conversation, and noticed nothing amiss until Lady Margaret's cry. Now Lady Margaret sat before Jap, her pale hands folded tightly in her lap, her pearl necklace glinting in the lamplight.
"I was at the foot of the table, Inspector," she said, her voice quavering. "I saw Beatrice slump forward, but I thought she was merely tired. She was elderly, you know. I didn't imagine poison." Dapper scribbled a note. "And you didn't see anyone tamper with her soup, or anything odd during the meal?" Lady Margaret shook her head, her eyes darting toward Dr. Ernest Caldwell, who stood by the window cleaning his spectacles. "No, nothing. The soup was served as usual. Perkins is meticulous." Poirot tilted his head, his moustache twitching. "Madame, you observed Lady Beatrice's refusal of the soup last night. Yet tonight she accepted. Did this not strike you as unusual?" Lady Margaret blinked, her fingers tightening. "I suppose it was odd, but Beatrice was contrary. She often changed her mind to make a point." Poirot nodded, filing the remark away. Next, Jap called Clara Winthrop. The actress swept into the chair, her emerald gown replaced by a sombre black dress, though her crimson lipstick remained bold. "I was sitting next to Beatrice," she said, her voice theatrical. "We chatted about the theatre. She seemed perfectly fine until, well, you know." "And the soup?" Jap pressed. "Did you see her eat it?" Clara hesitated, her eyes flickering. "No, she didn't touch it. She just stared at it, like she was cross with it. I thought it was her usual grumpiness." Poirot interjected softly. "Mademoiselle, you are most observant on the stage, n'est-ce pas? Did you notice anyone near Lady Beatrice's place setting, perhaps during the serving of the soup?" Clara's smile faltered. "I was talking to Lord Haverford. I didn't notice anything specific." Julian Trent was next, his booming voice subdued, as he sat heavily in the chair. "I was eating my soup, Inspector. Didn't see a blasted thing. Beatrice was always complaining, so I didn't pay her any mind." "And you, Madame Trent?" Jap asked, turning to Evelyn, who hovered behind her husband, her face pale. "I was across from Beatrice," Evelyn murmured, her voice barely audible. "I saw her take the soup, but she didn't eat it. I was watching my husband." Her eyes dropped, and Poirot noted the tension in her hands, still clutching her handkerchief. Dr. Ernest Caldwell was the last to be questioned, his thin frame rigid, as he adjusted his spectacles. "As a doctor, I can confirm she was poisoned," he said briskly. "The symptoms, sudden collapse, no visible trauma, suggest a fast-acting toxin. I was seated beside Monsieur Poirot, focused on my meal." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Doctor, you are precise in your habits. You cut your food with such care. Did you observe the service of the soup, perhaps the movements of Perkins, or the footman?" Caldwell frowned. "Perkins served as usual. I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary." Jap closed his notebook with a snap. "Right. That's everyone for now. Nobody leaves the estate." "Poirot, any thoughts?" Poirot smiled faintly. "The alibis. They are like the soup on the surface. They seem clear, but beneath there is complexity. The dining room, it holds the truth, and the habits of our friends. They betray more than they know." As Jap dismissed the guests, Poirot lingered, his mind returning to the dining room. The cold soup, the untouched spoon, the faint bitter scent, they were pieces of a puzzle. Clara's hesitation, Evelyn's anxiety, Caldwell's precision, and Lady Margaret's guarded glance at the doctor, all were threads in the tapestry. The dining habits, so carefully observed, were beginning to form a pattern, one that Poirot's little grey cells would soon unravel. Chapter 6. The Secret of the Soup Tureen. The morning after Lady Beatrice Langley's murder,
Ashbourne Hall was cloaked in a sombre hush, the grandeur of its oak-panelled halls dimmed by the weight of tragedy. Hercule Poirot, his morning coat pristine despite the early hour, stood in the dining room, where the table remained as it had been the previous night, save for the removal of Lady Beatrice's body. The silver soup tureen, still resting on the sideboard, gleamed under the pale light filtering through the mullioned windows. Poirot's green eyes fixed upon it, his little grey cells humming with purpose. Inspector Japp, rubbing his hands against the morning chill, joined Poirot, his boots echoing on the polished floor. "Morning, Poirot. Coroner's report confirms poison, cyanide likely in the soup though the lab's still testing. Fast acting. Explains why she keeled over so quick, but how'd it get there?" "Precisement, my dear Japp," Poirot replied, his moustache twitching as he approached the tureen. "The soup, it is the stage of this crime. And the tureen, it is the heart. Regardez." He lifted the lid with a gloved hand, peering inside. The remnants of the consommé had congealed, but a faint, acrid scent lingered, distinct from the rich aroma of beef and herbs. Japp leaned in, sniffing. "Smells off, doesn't it? You think the poison was in the tureen?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Peut-être, but consider, mon ami, all the guests received soup from this tureen, yet only Lady Beatrice succumbed. The poison, it was targeted. We must examine the method of delivery." He ran a finger along the tureen's rim, noting a slight irregularity, a faint scratch, barely visible, near the ladle's resting groove. "Tiens," he murmured. "This mark, it is not natural. A tool perhaps, or a deliberate act." Japp frowned. "A scratch? You're seeing clues in scratches now, Poirot." Poirot smiled faintly. "The smallest details, they speak loudly to Hercule Poirot. This tureen, it was handled by Perkins." "We? And the footman? They assisted?" Japp nodded. "Perkins served the soup himself, said it was his duty as head butler. Footman cleared the plates, but no one else touched the tureen." Poirot's gaze shifted to the table, where Lady Beatrice's place setting remained untouched, the spoon still neatly aligned beside the cold soup bowl. He recalled her reluctance to take soup the previous night, her grudging acceptance this time, and the fact that she never tasted it. "The poison, it was meant for her, alone," he said softly. "But how was it delivered, if not through the soup itself?" He turned to Perkins, who had entered silently, his face as impassive as ever. "Monsieur Perkins, you served the soup with care, n'est-ce pas? Did you notice anything unusual, perhaps a guest near the tureen before dinner, or an oddity in its way?" Perkins's eyes flickered, a momentary crack in his composure. "No, sir. The tureen was prepared in the kitchen by Monsieur Dubois, our chef. I carried it to the dining room myself. Everything was as it should be." Poirot nodded, but his mind seized on the butler's hesitation. "And the ladle, it rested in the tureen throughout the service?" "Yes, sir," Perkins said, his voice steady. "I ladled each bowl myself." "Très intéressant," Poirot murmured. He examined the ladle, its silver surface polished to a mirror shine, but his fingers paused at the handle's base, where a faint residue clung, a powdery trace, invisible to the untrained eye. "Mon Dieu, the ladle itself, it may hold the secret." Japp's eyes widened. "You think the poison was on the ladle? But how? Perkins served everyone from it." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The method, it is clever, Japp. The poison, it was not in the tureen, but applied with precision, perhaps to the ladle, or to the bowl of Lady Beatrice alone. We must test this residue." He turned to the table, his mind replaying the dinner. Clara's theatrical restraint, Julian's voracious eating, Evelyn's untouched plate, Caldwell's precise cuts, Lady Margaret's nervous glances. Each habit was a clue. But the tureen and its ladle were the pivot. "The dining room, it is a theatre of deception," Poirot said, "and the soup, it was the curtain that hid the act." As Japp sent the ladle and bowl for analysis, Poirot's thoughts turned to the guests, their alibis and their dining behavior. The scratch on the tureen, the residue on the ladle, they were threads in the tapestry of murder, and Poirot would weave them together to reveal the killer's hand. Chapter 7. The Late Night Confession. The clocks at Ashbourne Hall struck midnight, their chimes echoing through the darkened corridors like a mournful requiem. The guests had retired to their rooms, but sleep eluded the manor, its atmosphere thick with suspicion following Lady Beatrice Langley's murder. Hercule Poirot, clad in a silk dressing gown, his moustache still impeccably waxed, sat in the library, a single lamp casting a warm glow over shelves of leather-bound volume. He had chosen this quiet hour to reflect, his little grey cells sifting through the clues, the cold soup, the scratched tureen, the powdery residue on the ladle. A soft creak at the door interrupted his thought. Lady Margaret Haverford stood in the threshold, her pale face framed by a shawl, her eyes wide with unease. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "I must speak with you, alone." Poirot rose, his expression courteous but alert. "Madame, it is late, but Poirot, he is always at the service of truth. Entrez, s'il vous plaît."
Lady Margaret closed the door behind her, her hands trembling as she clutched her shawl. "I couldn't sleep, not after. Beatrice, I know something, Monsieur Poirot, something I didn't tell Inspector Japp." Poirot gestured to a chair, his green eyes studying her. "Speak, madame. The smallest detail. It may be the key to this puzzle." She sat, her voice barely above a whisper. "Beatrice. She was cruel, not just in her words but in her actions. She held a secret over me, a scandal from years ago, before I married Reginald. She threatened to expose it, to ruin us." Poirot's moustache twitched. "A scandal? Of what nature?" Lady Margaret's cheeks flushed. "It was a youthful indiscretion, a liaison with a man who was not suitable. Beatrice knew, and she used it to control me. She demanded money, influence. I paid her to keep silent, but at dinner she hinted she might speak anyway." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing. "And this dinner, madame, you observed her closely?" "Oui." "The soup, her refusal the first night, her acceptance the second. Did you see anything unusual in her behavior, or in the service?" Lady Margaret hesitated, her fingers twisting the shawl. "I was nervous, watching her. She seemed triumphant, as if she knew she held power. But I swear, I didn't touch her soup. I couldn't, I wouldn't." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "And the others, madame? Dr. Caldwell, perhaps, or Mademoiselle Winthrop? Did they act strangely at the table?" Her eyes flickered. "Dr. Caldwell, he was attentive to me, more than usual. He kept looking at my plate, my glass. I thought he was just being kind. But now," she trailed off, her gaze dropping. Poirot's little grey cells seized on this. Dr. Caldwell's precision, his glances at Lady Margaret, could they indicate more than concern? "And the tureen, madame? Or the ladle? Did you notice anyone near them, before dinner?" "No," she said quickly, then paused. "Though Clara was in the dining room early, adjusting her shawl by the sideboard. I thought nothing of it at the time." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, madame. You have been most helpful. Rest now, and speak of this to no one." As Lady Margaret slipped out, Poirot paced the library, the firelight casting shadows across his thoughtful face. Her confession added a motive, but it also muddied the waters. Lady Beatrice's blackmail could implicate Lady Margaret, yet her fear seemed genuine. Clara's presence near the tureen, Dr. Caldwell's attentiveness, these were threads in the tapestry woven through the dining room's rituals. He recalled the dinner, Clara's theatrical restraint, barely touching her food, Dr. Caldwell's methodical cuts, the Trents' contrasting habits, Julian's greed, Evelyn's abstinence. The tureen with its faint scratch and the ladle's residue remained central. Had the poison been applied there, or was the soup merely a distraction? The dining habits, so carefully observed, were beginning to form a pattern, and Poirot sensed the truth was close, hidden in the elegance of Ashbourne Hall's table. Chapter 8. The Butler's Observation. The morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Ashbourne Hall, casting a muted glow over the dining room, where the memory of Lady Beatrice Langley's murder lingered like a shadow. Hercule Poirot, his morning coat as immaculate as ever, stood by the sideboard,
his gloved fingers tracing the faint scratch on the silver soup tureen. The residue on the ladle, now with Inspector Japp for analysis, weighed on his mind, but it was the human element, the dining habits of the guests, that held the key to the puzzle. His little grey cells demanded a new perspective, and so he had summoned Perkins the butler, whose silent efficiency had overseen every course of the fatal dinner. Perkins entered, his face as impassive as a marble bust, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "You wished to see me, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice steady but low. "Oui, Monsieur Perkins," Poirot replied, his green eyes sharp. "You are the eyes and ears of this dining room, n'est-ce pas? You see what others do not, the small gestures, the habits at the table. Tell me, what did you observe on the night of Lady Beatrice's death?" Perkins straightened, his hands clasped behind his back. "I served the dinner as always, sir. The consommé was brought from the kitchen, prepared by Monsieur Dubois. I ladled it myself, and all was in order." Poirot's moustache twitched. "In order, you say? Yet Lady Beatrice, she did not touch her soup, and now she is dead. You noticed her refusal of the soup the first night. Oui, did anything else strike you as unusual, perhaps in the behavior of the other guest?" Perkins hesitated, his gaze drifting to the tureen. I did notice something, sir, though it seemed trivial at the time. Mr. Julian Trent." He reached across the table during the soup course, as if to adjust his wife's napkin. "It was odd, sir, for he's not usually so attentive." His hand passed near Lady Beatrice's bowl. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Tiens, this is most interesting. Mr. Trent, with his appetite so robust, yet he pauses to adjust a napkin. And where was his hand precisely?" "Near the edge of Lady Beatrice's place setting," Perkins said, his brow furrowing. "I thought it a clumsy gesture, but I didn't see him touch the bowl or the spoon." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Julian Trent's voracious eating had been a constant, yet this act of solicitude toward his wife, so close to the victim's soup, was a deviation. "And the others, Monsieur Perkins? Mademoiselle Winthrop, perhaps, or Dr. Caldwell? Any peculiarities in their dining habit?" Perkins's lips tightened. "Miss Winthrop, she barely ate, sir, picking at her food as if it were a prop. Dr. Caldwell, he was precise, cutting everything into small pieces, but he seemed distracted, glancing at Lady Margaret often. Miss Trent, she hardly touched her soup, just stirred it, her eyes on her husband." Poirot paced a few steps, his hands clasped behind his back. "And Lady Margaret, her behavior at the table?" "She was nervous, sir," Perkins said quietly. "She spilled a drop of wine, which is unlike her. She kept looking at Lady Beatrice, then at Dr. Caldwell." "Merci, Monsieur Perkins," Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. "You have given Poirot much to consider. The dining room, it is a mirror of the soul, and your eyes, they have seen more than you know." As Perkins bowed and withdrew, Poirot returned to the tureen, his fingers hovering over the scratch. The ladle's residue, Julian's unusual gesture, Clara's theatrical restraint, Evelyn's untouched soup, Caldwell's precision, Lady Margaret's nerves, these were pieces of the puzzle, each tied to the rituals of the table. The anomaly, Perkins described, Julian's hand near Lady Beatrice's bowl, suggested opportunity, but the method remained elusive. Had the poison been applied in that fleeting moment, or was the tureen itself the instrument? Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with possibility. The dining habits, so carefully catalogued, were forming a pattern, and the butler's observation had illuminated a new thread. The truth, he sensed, was drawing closer, hidden in the elegance of Ashbourne Hall's dining room, waiting for Hercule Poirot to unveil it. Chapter 9. The Second Dinner. The dining room at Ashbourne Hall, its chandeliers aglow with a deceptive warmth, was set once more for dinner on the evening following Lady Beatrice Langley's murder. Hercule Poirot, his black dinner jacket immaculate, had persuaded Lord Reginald Haverford to host another formal meal, insisting it was essential to steady the nerves of the guests. In truth, Poirot's little grey cells sought to recreate the scene of the crime, to observe the dining habits of the suspects under pressure, and to provoke a slip that might illuminate the method of the poison's delivery. The table gleamed with silver and crystal, the damask cloth pristine, though the absence of Lady Beatrice's sharp presence left a palpable void. Lord Reginald at the head, forced a jovial tone, his walrus mustache twitching, as he raised a glass of claret. To resilience, he said, his voice faltering. Lady Margaret at the foot managed a tight smile, her fingers gripping her napkin. The guests, Clara Winthrop, Ernest Caldwell, Julian and Evelyn Trent, took their seats with varying degrees of unease, their eyes darting to the sideboard where the silver soup tureen stood, a silent reminder of death. Poirot, seated between Clara and Dr. Caldwell, observed with the precision of a watchmaker. "Mes amis," he said, his voice smooth, "the table, it is a place of civility, n'est-ce pas? Yet it reveals the heart. Let us dine, and let us be ourselves." Clara, in a sapphire gown, laughed nervously, her fork hovering over the hors d'oeuvres of pâté de foie gras. "You make dining sound like a trial, Monsieur Poirot." "Peut-être," Poirot replied, his mustache twitching. "But the truth, it often emerges in the small acts, the way one holds a spoon or refuses a dish."
The soup course arrived, a cream of asparagus this time, served by Perkins with his customary precision. Poirot noted the butler's steady hands, though his eyes avoided the tureen, as if it were a cursed relic. Each guest received a bowl, and Poirot watched their reactions closely. Clara stirred her soup daintily, tasting only a drop. Julian Trent, true to form, slurped his with gusto, his napkin already spotted with cream. Evelyn, across from him, pushed her bowl away, her face pale, her hands twisting her handkerchief. Dr. Caldwell sipped methodically, his spectacles glinting as he glanced at Lady Margaret, who took a single spoonful before setting her spoon down. "Delicious," Lord Reginald said, though his voice lacked conviction. "De Bois outdoes himself, doesn't he?" "Indeed," Poirot said, his eyes on Evelyn Trent. "And yet, Madame Trent, you do not partake. The soup, it does not please you." Evelyn started, her eyes meeting Poirot's. I'm not hungry, Monsieur Poirot. After yesterday, she trailed off, her gaze dropping. Julian, wiping his mouth, laughed brusquely. "She's always picky, my Evelyn. More for me." He reached for her bowl, his hand brushing the tablecloth near Clara's place setting, a gesture eerily similar to the one Perkins had described, near Lady Beatrice's bowl. Poirot's green eyes narrowed. "Monsieur Trent, your solicitude for your wife's plate, it is most curious. You did the same, on the night of the murder." Julian froze, his hand mid-air. "What? I was just tidying up. Clumsy habit, that's all." Clara's laugh was sharp. "Clumsy? You nearly knocked over my wine glass just now, Julian." The tension at the table thickened, and Poirot seized the moment. "The dining room, it is a stage," he said softly. "And the soup, it is the spotlight. The tureen, the ladle, the bowl, they tell a story. Monsieur Perkins, you served with care. Oui, yet something was amiss." Perkins, standing by the sideboard, stiffened. "All was in order, sir," he said, but his voice wavered. Poirot's gaze swept the table, noting Evelyn's trembling hands, Julian's forced grin, Caldwell's tightened jaw, Lady Margaret's flushed cheeks, and Clara's calculated poise. The second dinner had revealed a critical slip. Julian's repeated gesture, so close to the victim's place setting, echoed the anomaly Perkins had observed. Was it a habit, or a deliberate act masking the poison's delivery? As the main course arrived, Poirot's mind raced. The scratch on the tureen, the residue on the ladle, and now Julian's suspicious reach. They were threads in the tapestry of murder. The dining habits so meticulously catalogued were converging, and Poirot sensed the killer's mask was beginning to slip. Chapter 10. The Missing Spoon. The dining room at Ashbourne Hall, though cleared of the previous evening's meal, retained an air of unease, its chandeliers casting a soft glow over the polished mahogany table. Hercule Poirot, his morning coat as pristine as ever, stood alone in the room, his green eyes scanning the place settings with the precision of a jeweler inspecting a gem. The second dinner had revealed Julian Trent's suspicious gesture, echoing Perkins's observation from the night of Lady Beatrice's murder. But it was a new discovery, made in the quiet of the morning,
that set Poirot's little grey cells ablaze, a missing spoon from the dining table. Inspector Japp had returned to the manor, his notebook filled with the coroner's confirmation of cyanide poisoning and the lab's report on the ladle's residue. A trace of cyanide, cleverly applied, yet the tureen itself showed no poison, suggesting a targeted delivery. Poirot, determined to unravel the method, had requested the dining room be left untouched until he could inspect it further. Now, as he examined Lady Beatrice's place setting, he noted the absence of the silver soup spoon that had lain beside her untouched bowl on the fatal night. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his moustache twitching. "The spoon, it is gone, and this, it is no accident." He summoned Perkins, who appeared promptly, his face a mask of professional calm, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of apprehension. "Monsieur Perkins," Poirot said, his voice soft but commanding, "the place setting of Lady Beatrice, it is incomplete. A soup spoon is missing. You cleared the table after the murder. Oui? Where is it?" Perkins's brow furrowed, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. "I cleared the bowls myself, sir, under Inspector Japp's orders. All the cutlery was accounted for, or so I thought. I'll check with the staff." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Non, Monsieur Perkins, you will check now, with Poirot. The spoon, it is a thread in this tapestry of deceit." Together, they searched the sideboard, the silver cabinet, and the kitchen, where Monsieur Dubois, the chef, was preparing luncheon. The kitchen staff, flustered by Poirot's presence, confirmed that no stray spoon had been found among the washed cutlery. Poirot's gaze lingered on the tureen, stored in a locked cupboard since the murder, its faint scratch still visible. The ladle, now with Japp, had held the cyanide, but the missing spoon suggested a more intricate plot. Returning to the dining room, Poirot reconstructed the scene in his mind. Lady Beatrice's cold soup, her untouched spoon, Julian's hand near her bowl, Clara's presence by the sideboard, Dr. Caldwell's glances at Lady Margaret, Evelyn's untouched plate. The spoon's absence was deliberate, he concluded, a clue hidden in plain sight, perhaps removed to conceal evidence of the poison's application. Japp joined him, rubbing his hands against the morning chill. "Found something, Poirot. The lab says the cyanide was on the ladle, but only a trace, not enough to poison the whole tureen." "Précisément, Japp," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "The poison, it was targeted to Lady Beatrice's bowl, and the spoon, it is missing. Why? Because it too may have held a trace of cyanide, or because it points to the killer's hand." Japp scratched his head. "A missing spoon, you're building a case on cutlery now." Poirot smiled faintly. "The dining room, it is a stage, mon ami. The habits of the guests, their movements at the table, they betray the truth. The spoon, it was taken to hide something, perhaps a mark, a residue, or a gesture." He recalled Perkins's observation of Julian's hand near Lady Beatrice's bowl, Clara's early arrival by the tureen, and Evelyn's refusal to eat. Caldwell's precision, Lady Margaret's nerves. Each habit was a piece of the puzzle. The missing spoon, Poirot sensed, was the key to the poison's delivery, a silent witness to the murderer's cunning. "Allons, Japp," Poirot said, his voice resolute. "We must question the guests again, focusing on the table. The spoon, it will lead us to the killer, for it was touched by the hand that struck." As Japp nodded, preparing to summon the guests, Poirot's mind raced. The dining habits, the tureen, the ladle, and now the missing spoon. They formed a pattern, intricate and deliberate. The truth was close, hidden in the elegance of Ashbourne Hall's dining room, waiting for Hercule Poirot to uncover it. Chapter 11. The Gathering of Suspects. The dining room, at Ashbourne Hall, its chandeliers casting a sombre glow, was once again the stage for a gathering, but this time, no meal was served. Hercule Poirot, his black dinner jacket, impeccable, stood at the head of the mahogany table, his green eyes sweeping over the assembled guests. The air was thick with tension, the memory of Lady Beatrice Langley's murder hanging like a Inspector Japp stood by the fireplace, his notebook tucked away, watching Poirot with a mix of skepticism and anticipation. The silver soup tureen, now locked in evidence, loomed in Poirot's mind, alongside the ladle's cyanide residue, and the missing spoon. A constellation of clues, pointing to the killer. Lord Reginald Haverford sat heavily, his joviality replaced by a furrowed brow. Lady Margaret, beside him, clutched her handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously. Clara Winthrop, in a subdued grey dress, sat with calculated poise, her crimson lipstick a defiant splash of colour. Julian Trent, his tie askew, shifted uncomfortably, while Evelyn Trent, pale and silent, gripped her husband's arm. Dr. Ernest Caldwell, his spectacles glinting, stood rigid, his hands clasped behind his back. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding, "we are gathered in this dining room, where Lady Beatrice met her tragic end, to uncover the truth. The soup, it was cold. The spoon, it is missing, and the tureen, it bears a scratch. These are not mere details, they are the threads of a tapestry, woven by a murderer." A murmur rippled through the guests. Clara's lips parted, but she said nothing. Julian cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "Get on with it, Poirot. Who did it?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Patience, Monsieur Trent. The dining room, it is a mirror of the soul. Your habits at the table, they betray you. Let us review." He paced slowly, his eyes locking on each guest. "Lady Margaret, you confessed to a secret held by Lady Beatrice, a scandal she used to extort you. Your nerves at dinner, your spilled wine, they speak of fear, yet you did not touch her soup."
Lady Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "I told you in confidence, Monsieur Poirot. I didn't kill her." Poirot nodded, turning to Clara. "Mademoiselle Winthrop, you were seen by the tureen before dinner, adjusting your shawl. Your appetite, it is theatrical, barely touching your food. Were you perhaps ensuring the poison reached its mark?" Clara's laugh was sharp. "Nay, I was fixing my shawl, not poisoning soup. You've no proof." Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Caldwell. "Doctor, your precision at the table, your glances at Lady Margaret, they suggest a connection. As a physician, you know poisons. Did you apply the cyanide to the ladle, perhaps?" Caldwell's jaw tightened. "I'm a doctor, not a murderer. I was eating my soup same as the others." Poirot turned to Julian and Evelyn. "Monsieur Trent, your hand, it strayed near Lady Beatrice's bowl, as Perkins observed, a gesture repeated at the second dinner. And Madame Trent, you refused your soup. Your eyes always on your husband. What do you hide?" Julian's face reddened. "I was helping Evelyn. That's all. Clumsy, maybe, but not criminal." Evelyn's voice was a whisper. "I was afraid. After Beatrice's threats, I couldn't eat." Poirot paused, his mustache twitching. "The spoon, it is missing. Why?" "Because it held the poison, applied not to the tureen, nor the ladle, but to the spoon itself, placed at Lady Beatrice's setting. The killer, they knew she would accept the soup that night after refusing it before." Jupp leaned forward. "The spoon, but it's gone, Poirot. How does that help us?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "It is gone because the killer removed it to hide their method. But the dining habits, they betray the hand that struck. One of you in this room moved with purpose, and Poirot, he sees the pattern." The guests exchanged glances, their faces a mix of fear, defiance, and guilt. Lady Margaret's handkerchief tore under her fingers. Clara's poise wavered. Julian's fists clenched. Evelyn's eyes brimmed with tears, and Caldwell's spectacles slipped down his nose. The room crackled with tension, the truth hovering just out of reach. "Mes amis," Poirot said softly, "the dining room has spoken, and the killer, they cannot hide. Tomorrow, Poirot will reveal all." As Jupp ushered the guests out, Poirot lingered, his mind fixed on the missing spoon, the scratch, the ladle, and the habits that betrayed a murderer. The final piece was falling into place, and the elegance of Ashbourne Hall's dining room would soon unmask the guilty. Chapter 12. The final twist. The dining room at Ashbourne Hall, its chandeliers aglow with a solemn brilliance, was once again the stage for Hercule Poirot's denouement. The mahogany table, stripped of its cloth, stood bare, a stark reminder of the murder that had shattered the manor's elegance. The guests, Lord Reginald Haverford, Lady Margaret, Clara Winthrop, Dr. Ernest Caldwell, Julian Trent, and Evelyn Trent, sat in a tense semicircle, their faces etched with anticipation and dread. Inspector Jupp stood by the door, his arms crossed, watching Poirot with a mix of respect and impatience. The silver soup tureen, now in evidence, lingered in Poirot's mind, alongside the ladle's cyanide residue, the tureen's scratch, and the missing spoon, the threads of a tapestry woven by a cunning killer. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice steady, his green eyes piercing, "we stand in the dining room, where Lady Beatrice Langley met her end, poisoned by cyanide in a bowl of soup she never tasted. The cold soup, the missing spoon, the scratched tureen, the ladle's residue, they are not mere details, they are the language of murder." And Hercule Poirot, he has listened. Lord Reginald shifted, his moustache quivering. "Get to it, Poirot. Who killed her?" Poirot raised a hand, his moustache twitching. "Patience, mon lord. The dining room, it is a mirror of the soul. Your habits at the table, they betray you. Let us unravel the crime." He paced, his small figure commanding the room. Lady Beatrice, she was a blackmailer, holding secrets over Lady Margaret and others. Her death, it was planned with precision. The cyanide, confirmed by the lab, was found on the ladle, but not in the tureen. How, then, did it reach her bowl? The answer lies in the missing spoon. Clara Winthrop's eyes narrowed. "The spoon? But it's gone, Monsieur Poirot. How can it solve anything?" Poirot's gaze fixed on her. "Précisément, mademoiselle. The spoon is gone because the killer removed it, to hide their method. But the dining habits, they reveal the truth. Let us consider the night of the murder." He turned to Julian Trent. "Monsieur Trent, your appetite, it is voracious, yet you reached across the table, near Lady Beatrice's bowl, to adjust your wife's napkin, a gesture," Perkins noted, "and which you repeated at the second dinner. Suspicious, none?" Julian's face reddened. "I told you, I'm clumsy. I didn't touch her blasted soup." Poirot nodded, turning to Evelyn. "Madame Trent, you refused your soup, your eyes always on your husband. You feared something, perhaps you knew of his actions." Evelyn's hands trembled, her voice a whisper. "I was afraid of Beatrice's threats. She knew about Julian's debts, threatened to ruin us." Poirot's eyes flicked to Dr. Caldwell. "Doctor, your precision at the table, your glances at Lady Margaret, they suggest a deeper connection. As a physician, you know cyanide's effects. Were you protecting someone?" Caldwell adjusted his spectacles, his voice sharp. "I've done nothing but eat my meal, Poirot." Poirot turned to Lady Margaret. "Madame, your scandal, your fear of Beatrice, it gave you motive. Your spilled wine, your nerves, did they betray a guilty hand?" Lady Margaret gasped. "I paid her to stay silent. I didn't kill her." Poirot paused, his eyes gleaming. "The killer, they knew Lady Beatrice would accept the soup that night, after refusing it before. They applied cyanide, not to the tureen, nor the ladle, but to the spoon itself, placed at her setting. The scratch on the tureen, it was a distraction, made to suggest tampering. The ladle's residue, a trace from the poisoned spoon's contact. But the spoon, it was removed after her death, before Perkins cleared the table. Jupp frowned. "But who took it, Poirot? And how?" Poirot's voice softened, his gaze locking on Clara Winthrop. "Mademoiselle Winthrop, you were by the tureen before dinner, adjusting your shawl. Your dining habit so restrained, so theatrical, it hid a purpose. You poisoned the spoon, knowing Lady Beatrice's habit of inspecting her cutlery, her lips touching it before the soup. You took the spoon after her collapse, in the chaos, to hide your method." Clara's laugh was brittle.
Absurd. I barely knew her. Poirot's smile was cold. Non, mademoiselle. Lady Beatrice knew your secret. A past affair perhaps that threatened your career. You admitted to being near the sideboard, and your shawl, it was found with a silver spoon hidden in its folds, discovered this morning by the maid. Clara's face paled, her poise crumbling. You can't prove. Jupp stepped forward, producing the spoon, its silver tarnished with a faint residue. Found it in your room, Miss Winthrop. The lab's testing it now, but I'd wager it's cyanide. The room erupted in gasps. Clara's eyes darted. Then she slumped, her voice breaking. She was going to ruin me, my career, my life. I only meant to scare her. But she touched the spoon, and Poirot nodded, his voice gentle, but firm. The dining habit, mademoiselle, your restraint, your presence, by the tureen, it betrayed you. The cold soup, it was a witness, for Lady Beatrice never tasted it, only the poison on her spoon. As Jupp led Clara away, the guests sat in stunned silence. Lord Reginald buried his face in his hands. Lady Margaret wept, and Evelyn clung to Julian. Dr. Caldwell's shoulders sagged. His secret glances, explained as mere affection, not guilt. The dining room, once a stage of elegance, had revealed its darkest secret. Poirot straightened, his mustache impeccable. Mes amis, the table, it speaks the truth. And Hercule Poirot, he listened.